In 2016, Bethesda lead writer Emil Pagliarulo gave a 40-minute presentation on writing and storytelling. This presentation gives a lot of insight into Emil's thought process, or the lack thereof. To briefly summarize, he says that great games are played, not made.
Great games are played and not made.
He says players will just rip up the pages and make them into paper airplanes.
And so what happens with, we're writing our great American novel. This is the process. This is what happens at Bethesda when you write the main story of a game, and even some of the smaller stories. So let's say, okay, we're going to write the great American novel. It's going to be this thick. And on every page will be written comedy and tragedy, and it'll be wonderful. It'll be amazing. And you're going to give this book, this great American novel, to the player. And what are they going to do with it? They're going to rip out every page and make paper airplanes out of them. And they're going to throw them around the room. And they're never going to see your story.
So basically, there's no point in even bothering to put any effort into the writing. And in every game that Emil has written for, this shows. This 40-minute presentation was a long way of telling us that he's not qualified to be a writer, without telling us he's not qualified to be a writer, and it also makes it clear that he is in over his head. The idea that great games are played, not made, works for certain genres, but a story-driven action RPG is not one of them. Fallout 3 is a story-driven action RPG. As such, it suffers enormously from terrible writing in ways that wouldn't be an issue if it were of some other genre. Fallout 3 does not even have the settlement building gimmick as a crutch that it can fall back on the way that Fallout 4 can. My goal in making videos such as this one is to not only present the game as it is, but also to share my own thoughts on how it could have been better if Bethesda writers like Emil took their job more seriously and put some effort into it, instead of dismissing the writing as something that didn't matter. The quality of the writing does matter. Emil's flippant attitude is fine for a game like Peggle, but it is not fine for Fallout. So, where to begin? Fallout 3 should begin at the point of leaving the vault, rather than the point of our character's birth. So let's start there. If you don't care about spoilers, and you want to know how to skip past this main starting quest, check out my guide on how to find James at the start. But if not, then keep watching this video as I take a more organic approach. If you had bothered to read the terminal in the Overseer's office on your way out of the vault, it clues you in that the nearby town of Megaton is a good place to start in the search for your father. But supposing that you didn't read the terminal, the quest marker still directs you to Megaton anyway. So let's start there. On approaching the entrance to this rusty junk pile of a town, the gates inexplicably open themselves up to us as we are welcomed by a robot named Deputy Weld. Upon entering the town, we are greeted again by a self-appointed sheriff named Lucas Sims. We can ask him if he knows anything regarding the whereabouts of our father.
Nope, sorry. I got enough fires to put out in this place that I don't have time to keep tabs on every visitor. I'd ask around town.
He does not. At this point, I check the quest log, and the quest marker which led us to the town leads us no further. We have to do our own investigating from here. Let's see. This fellow seems friendly. Let's ask him.
Oh, look. Another one of you wasteland assholes. Look here, asshole. I don't like you. Stay clear of me and we'll have no trouble. Are you fucking kidding me? Get out of my face. Heh, yeah, right. I don't think so. You're joking, right? I mean, I shit bigger than you, kid. Come back when you got some fight in you. Until then, save your threats.
Okay, that was no help. So, let's ask this woman here.
Oh man, you're looking for your dad? That is so sweet. Did he run out on you when you were a kid or something? Our parents died when we were kids. My brother Leo, he's the oldest. He raised my brother Andy and me. It was hard on him, but we turned out okay. But God, you don't want to hear about that. I'm sorry, but I haven't seen your dad. He didn't eat at the Brass Lantern. I'd remember if he did.
She doesn't know either. How about this crackpot standing in this radioactive puddle?
Could it be a new addition to our humble little community? Dear child, welcome. Welcome to Megaton. I am Confessor Cromwell, prophet of Atom and father of the undying glow. Please, child, come to the church anytime at all. Many of the transient visitors end up at one of Megaton's seedier establishments. I suggest you speak to Colin Moriarty and continue your search there.
From this crackpot, we now have an update to our quest log, and the quest marker reappears again, so let's blindly follow that. The quest marker leads to a saloon, but moreover, it also leads to a specific person, the saloon's proprietor, an Irishman named Colin Moriarty. Let's talk to him and see what he has to say.
Colin Moriarty, at your service. Welcome to Moriarty's. My saloon, my home, my slice of heaven in this backwoods little burg. If you've got the caps, I've got your pleasure. Please sit down, make yourself comfortable. Your troubles are a thing of the past. My God, it's you. The little baby boy all grown up. Persistent little bastard, ain't you? Then and now, it would seem. It's been a long time, kid. Oh, your daddy passed through here all right. Here and gone. Got what he came for and then left. I'm assuming you'll do the same, correct? You seem like a nice kid, so I'm going to be straight with you. Your dad was here, and now he's not. And yes, I know where he went. But what you're asking me for is information, and information is a commodity. Let's say 100 cops, and Daddy's location is yours. Very reasonable. All right, kid. Let me help you out. You know, for all time's sake. If you don't have the cops to pay for the information, then maybe you could do a little favor for me. Eager, eh? Good. I like that. It's nice to have a doer in this shithole of a town for a change. This junky bitch named Silver borrowed quite a few caps from me. Claimed she could start funneling Jet and Psycho to me for a good price. Problem is, she scrammed with the loot and set herself up in Springvale so she can inject herself into a stupor. Get the caps she owes me and they're yours. Yours to pay me with, anyway.
Colin Moriarty claims he knows the whereabouts of James, but he considers information to be a commodity and will only sell this to us for 100 caps. There is an alternative method to obtain this information that involves his terminal in the back, but for the purpose of this video, we will only focus on the unmarked minor quest called 300 Pieces of Silver. Moriarty tells us that a junky bitch named Silver made off with his caps and is now holed up in the nearby town of Springvale. If we accept this quest, there will now be a map marker leading directly to her. I don't just mean leading to the town of Springvale, and then we have to scour the town to try to find her. I mean, the quest marker leads us literally directly to her, inside of the only house in the town that is still standing. I consider it a major flaw when a quest marker gives such detailed and specific information that our characters shouldn't know, and it's not like she's even hard to find since there's only one house in the town still standing anyway. I feel this quest could have been done a lot better if the ruins of Springvale were larger and it was more of a hunt to try to track her down, but instead it is just a simple follow the quest marker. But it is what it is. Alternatively, let's say that we didn't go to Megaton at the start of the game, but instead we immediately explored Springvale upon exiting the vault. Well, To Bethesda's credit, this unmarked minor quest can also be activated by walking into Silver's house and talking to her, even if you had not already talked to Moriarty prior. It is always a good thing when quests can be initiated multiple ways. However, in the case of this quest, it is so shallow and linear that it doesn't really mean anything, however which way you do it. You do, however, have a variety of options for dealing with Silver. If you are concerned about karma, you can just tell her to keep the caps, and instead of receiving them, you will instead receive positive karma. All other options aside from this will result in receiving some caps, but the amount varies depending on the method you use. You can pickpocket the caps from her, or kill her and loot them from her body, but this will result in karma loss. However, if you provoke her into hostility through the calm down before I put you down dialogue option, then you can kill her without a loss of karma. One word of note, though, she can potentially be tough to deal with at the start of the game. I believe she is actually more powerful than any of the vault security guards or rad roaches you had to deal with up to this point. The Vault 101 security are a lot weaker than you might think, considering their training and gear. I think Sara Silver could easily mop the floor with them. She puts up more of a fight than the people in my basement. But assuming you don't want to kill her, you can get caps from her through dialogue, by hearing her side of the story and convincing her to hand them over.
Who the hell are you? Where'd you come from? Did Moriarty send you? That bastard. He's a liar. He just wants me dead. Those caps are all mine. I earned them. Look, I used to work for that slob, doing, favors for guys. Well, I got sick and tired of it. I told Moriarty I'm taking my share of the caps and leaving. I even slept with the pig to seal the deal. Next morning he tells me I couldn't leave. So I bolted. I took my money and ran. Now he's branded me a thief and a junkie and sent his cronies to find me. I guess I need a new hiding place. You do that for me? I never expected anyone to care enough. Here you go. Thanks, kid. You're all right.
Or you can use a speech check, which will give an extra 100 caps. And regardless of your speech skill, you can save scum and reload until the speech check rolls in your favor. Because, unlike New Vegas, Bethesda made the brilliant decision of having speech checks be decided by a dice roll, instead of by making actual compelling and coherent arguments. But this would have required more talent and effort than what Emil either wanted to do and/or was able to do. So instead of well-written dialogue choices that can alter a person's worldview, we instead get random dice rolls that can randomly alter a person's worldview, and the quality of this dialogue remains just as abysmal whether a person's skill is 5 or 100. To summarize, killing her will yield 400 caps. The normal dialogue option gives 300 caps, and passing the speech check gives 400 caps, or you can tell her to keep them for positive karma. But there's a trick I discovered where you can actually get 500 caps, but this will result in a loss of karma. To do this, first pass the speech check to get the 400 caps. Then, after you do this, you can attempt to pickpocket her to see that she doesn't have any more caps in her inventory. However, this is not entirely the case. If you then kill her, you will see that an additional 100 caps can be recovered from her body when you perform a full body cavity search. As for which body cavity she had these caps hidden in is something I will leave to your imagination. But this is how you can get 500 caps if you don't mind getting your hands a little dirty, in more ways than one. Now, speaking of dirty, something I had discovered quite a long time ago about this house is that there is no bathroom. No bathtub, no shower, and not even a toilet. So where and how does she do her business? I posit that she probably does it outside somewhere, just like a wild animal would do. But this is a problem with this house and how it is designed. There's only 2 quasi-rooms in this house, a sort of bedroom area and a kitchen/dining area. That's it. No bathroom, nothing else. And this must have been the case since the house was built back in the pre-war. I believe this is also true with certain other houses in the game, so it's most likely just a case of Bethesda screwing up in their world design and nothing more. Throughout this bathroomless house, there are a variety of items. I posit that many of these items were already here within the house when Sara moved in. It seems unlikely that she carried all of these items in her pocket during her hasty flight from Moriarty's, but you never know.
But you never know.
But whether she brought these items or simply found them here already, either way, she has claimed them for herself, and they are marked as owned, and she will become hostile if she catches you stealing them. Of note, there is some jet on a shelf, as well as some psycho on another shelf. These, combined with the 4 doses of psycho which she has in her pocket, confirms that she truly is a junkie bitch, just as Moriarty alleged. Near the psycho, there is a radio that is tuned into the Enclave station. This is interesting because the radio at Moriarty's saloon is tuned into GNR. To me, what this suggests is that Sara Silver is an Enclave sympathizer, and therefore it is likely that she is what the kids nowadays would call based. Gob and Nova, back at the saloon, listened to Three Dog and his quote-unquote good fight. But Silver, on the other hand, wants nothing to do with that collectivist, Marxist good fight crap, and instead she has gone her own separate way and became an Enclave supporter. That's what this radio tuned into the Enclave station suggests to me. Further evidence to support the theory that Silver is an Enclave sympathizer can be found in the fact that later in the game, an Enclave vertibird will touch down just outside her house. I mean, they land literally right next to her house, and a squad of Enclave disembark and set up a camp there and patrol the area. Yet they leave Sara alone, so please explain that to me. There is also the Springvale schoolhouse nearly adjacent as well. From this schoolhouse, Boppo and the gang used to conduct raids on hapless caravans and the town of Megaton, until one fateful day when Boppo met his glorious end at the gates outside of the town at the hands of Lucas Sims. Or so the legends say. Please see my in-depth video on the lore of Boppo if you want to learn more. But it seems that from the time of Boppo's death, the raiders of Springvale Elementary have become somewhat isolationist and began digging a tunnel instead of their usual routine of raiding. It might be for this reason that they leave Sara Silver alone. It is even possible that they don't even know she is there. But my own personal headcanon is that the raiders do know she is there, and they have some sort of agreement or understanding with her. Despite what she says about no longer performing her old prostitution services, she might actually still do this for the raiders in exchange for them leaving her alone, and or in exchange for drugs, or whatever. Or it may be the case that it's the other way around, and that she's set up a drug lab of sorts and is supplying these drugs to the raiders. This is supported by something Colin Moriarty says in his dialogue of her doing something to that effect. But there isn't much inside this little house of hers to suggest there's a drug lab here, aside from some turpentine and a few minor things that might be used in such a way. But there is no hard, conclusive evidence that she interacts with the raiders. I just think that given their close proximity to her, that it is logical that they would interact. But knowing Bethesda and the level of
care and craftsmanship
in how their games are designed, this is probably expecting far too much out of this game. Oh well. On the floor near the back door, there are 3 boxes of .32 caliber ammunition with 5 rounds each, for a total of 15. This is the same ammunition that the .32 caliber pistol in Sarah's inventory uses, but why it's laying there on the floor is something I can't explain. What sort of environmental storytelling could you possibly infer from this? Other than her being a careless slob, perhaps? In regards to the other items in the house, I don't have anything to say. There is no notable loot to be found here. There is both pre-war and fresh food, however. It seems unlikely to me that she brought this food with her, so did she get this from trading with the nearby raiders or caravans? Was the food already there when she arrived? Considering that this small ranch is the only habitable home in all of Springvale and there's a housing shortage in nearby Megaton, it seems that this house would be a prime real estate, so it boggles the mind that Sarah came here and found it had been abandoned for the last 200 years. You'd think that someone would have had enough common sense to live here, and considering the items, especially the food inside the house, it suggests that maybe someone was. But whom? Well, in the research I did in making my lore video on Boppo, I learned that the water beggar Mickey that sits outside of Megaton is connected with Springvale because of something in the official game guide which says he escaped from a run-in with raiders at the nearby school. The guide doesn't elaborate on that, but he was clearly in the town for some reason, and as I noted in that video, his race in the game files is Caucasian Raider, which suggests that he has a raider background. In my Boppo lore video, I posited that he may have been one of the raiders in Boppo's fateful, failed attempt to raid Megaton. Perhaps he is even Boppo himself. There is nothing to prove or disprove that theory in the game. But another possibility could be that this small ranch house is where Mickey was residing. Since there is no toilet in the house, my headcanon is that Mickey was taking a dump out in back behind the house when suddenly this junky bitch showed up with her .32 caliber pistol and told him to make like a dog and flee. So Mickey might have been the owner of this house, but Sara Silver literally caught him with his pants down, and then she evicted him and took over everything. All of this stuff inside of the house, including the food, was probably Mickey's. Now, that, of course, is just a theory, and feel free to disagree with me if you like, but I think it makes sense. The Fallout Guide blaming this on raiders at the school might be something he said to save face, because it's less humiliating than the reality that he was bullied and evicted by a junkie bitch when he was taking a crap behind the house. No one would want to admit to that happening to them, so of course they'd blame it on raiders instead. Again, it is just a theory. But regardless of that, why exactly did she come here? Sara and Moriarty tell somewhat contradictory versions of what happened. Moriarty says,
This junky bitch named Silver borrowed quite a few caps from me. Claimed she could start funneling Jet and Psycho to me for a good price. Problem is, she scrammed with the loot and set herself up in Springvale so she can inject herself into a stupor. Get the caps she owes me and they're yours. Yours to pay me with, anyway.
Silver, on the other hand, has this to say.
Look, I used to work for that slob, doing, favors for guys. Well, I got sick and tired of it. I told Moriarty I'm taking my share of the caps and leaving. I even slept with the pig to seal the deal. Next morning he tells me I couldn't leave. So I bolted. I took my money and ran. Now he's branded me a thief and a junkie and sent his cronies to find me. I guess I need a new hiding place.
According to Moriarty's account, Silver borrowed caps as part of a business agreement where she would funnel Jet and Psycho back to him for a good price. Although where or how she gets this Jet and Psycho is never explained. Clearly she does have some, however, so she must have obtained it somehow. Something is clearly missing here in how Bethesda handled the world building for this quest. There either needed to be some clearer evidence of Silver running a drug lab or something of that sort, or it needed to be shown or told how she got these drugs. I could accept that she gets them from the raiders, but there's no clear sign of a drug lab in the school either, so that just shifts the problem rather than solving it. You have to give Fallout New Vegas credit because in that game it is made abundantly clear where and how the fiends get their chems, and in Fallout 2 we know where Jet comes from.
We know where Jet comes from. Jet plays an important role in Fallout 2. In Fallout 2, we meet the inventor of Jet, a young boy genius named Myrnon. What makes this even more frustrating is we know the lengths that Myrnon went to invent Jet.
But even though chems like Jet and Psycho exist all over Fallout 3, it is not shown who is making these chems. The only possible exception I can think of is the ghoul scientist, Murphy, at Northwest Seneca Station. He has a drug lab, and it's the only one I'm aware of offhand in the game. But he uses this lab to make Ultra Jet, not regular Jet, because regular Jet doesn't have much effect on ghouls. So the bottom line is we don't know where or how Silver is getting these chems. I don't know the entirety of Fallout 3 inside and out, so it's quite possible that I'm missing something, but it seems to be a similar shandification failure on the part of Bethesda as the question of where Megaton gets its food supply or where Lucas Sims takes his prisoners. It just works, so don't question it. So anyway, depending on whose story you believe, Sara Silver either borrowed caps from Moriarty as part of some drug deal operation, or she took the caps and run off. I know most people will have a tendency to distrust Colin Moriarty because he's a bit sleazy, but to his credit, he does tell the truth about our character being born outside of the vault, and that's more than what can be said about James himself, who lies about it. So, say whatever you like about Colin Moriarty, but at least he tells it like it is. He may charge you caps before he'll tell it like it is, but at least what he tells seems to be the truth. For whatever else he is, there's no reason to believe that he's a liar. Sara Silver, on the other hand, calls him a liar, though.
He's a liar!
Regardless of who you believe on the caps situation, it is clear that Moriarty is right about her being a junkie. The evidence of this can be found in her inventory and on the shelves of her house, and this does impact her credibility because junkies aren't exactly in their right mind. So there's a good chance Moriarty is completely right about everything. But there's a chance that he isn't. While I have no reason to suspect him to be a liar, he clearly isn't a man of virtue either. He's a sinner, and surely to be cast down into the fires of hell, if indeed there is such a place. I don't just mean because of selling booze and prostitution, but consider his treatment of Gob. Not only is he cruel and abusive and smacks this poor ghoul around, but if what Nova says is true, Gob is actually a slave that is owned by Moriarty.
He's been here for, I guess about 15 years now. Ever since Moriarty bought him off those slavers.
or at least an indentured servant, indebted to him, and forced to work to repay that debt, which isn't helped by the fact Moriarty also charges for food and board. Slavery is wrong, and I'm sure that most will agree, which is why Colin Moriarty is not a good man, because he is a slave owner. He bought Gob from slavers and treats him like a slave ever since. If I ever do a video on Colin Moriarty, I'm sure I'll go into this in more depth, but the game files say he is neutral karma. I feel that because he owns a slave and abuses him, he should actually be evil karma. And for that matter, the self-appointed mayor and sheriff of the town, Lucas Sims, probably should not be considered to be good karma either, like the game does. Sims is allowing this slavery and cruel abuse to continue right under his nose, and he will not do a goddamn thing about it. But this video isn't about Moriarty or Sims, so I'll leave it at that for now. Strangely, no one other than Moriarty has anything whatsoever to say about Silver. No one else in the saloon, or even the town, or even the entire game of Fallout 3 has anything to say about her at all. By the way, I just feel I should point out that even though Silver's name is just Silver in the game, apparently there are references within the game files that refer to her as Sara Silver. So Sara is probably her real name. Silver might be her surname, or it might just be a nickname or something. I think Bethesda may have changed her name in development from Sara into Silver because they thought it was clever, because the name of this unmarked minor quest is 300 pieces of silver, a biblical reference to the 30 pieces of silver that Judas was paid for betraying Jesus. I think Bethesda changed the name because they thought that was clever. That's just my guess, though. But all references to her name being Sara have been stripped from the game itself and now only exist unseen in the files. So take it with a grain of salt whether that name is canon or not. For the purpose of this video, I still consider it to be her canon name, though. But only Moriarty alone mentions her by name. I even checked Moriarty's terminal in the back, and there is no mention of her on it at all. Nor is there anything mentioning her anywhere in the saloon or in the entire game that I'm aware of. I would think that Gob or Nova should have something to say about Silver, but I've scoured their dialogue trees and couldn't find any mention. The upper floor of Moriarty's saloon has 4 bedrooms, and presumably one of these belonged to Silver when she worked there. You can probably figure out which room was Silver's by waiting until each character goes to sleep and see which room they go to. Whichever room none of them went to must have been Silver's through the process of elimination. I didn't bother to test this, and it doesn't really matter. There's no clues or lore to be found in any of these rooms. It would have been great if Silver had left behind a diary or something to that effect, and then we could have more insight into her story. But this is a Bethesda game after all, so what can you expect? As abusive as Moriarty is towards Gob, we could assume his treatment of Nova and Silver isn't the kindest either. He may treat them somewhat better on account of the fact that they're women, or the fact that they're smooth-skins. By the way, that's another thing. Colin Moriarty is not only a slave owner of Gob, but in addition, if he treats Gob poorly on account of being a ghoul, then that means he's also a racist to boot. So please explain to me why he's considered neutral karma and not evil. He may not be the worst character in the game, but from what we can infer, he's clearly pretty bad. We don't know how well Nova and Silver were treated by him, but presumably not very well considering Silver fled and was apparently traumatized by her experience in the saloon to the point that she now abuses drugs to help her forget.
Yeah? What is it? Who knows? Shoot myself up till I forget who I am? The wasteland sucks, kid. Just get used to it.
And if you kill Moriarty, then Nova won't shed any tears at his death. And she, too, retires from the whole prostitution thing. Though you still have to pay the same exorbitant amount in order to rent a room. Silver says that the night before she left, she slept with Moriarty to seal the deal, as she puts it.
I even slept with the pig to seal the deal.
But the next morning, he forbade her to leave, so she bolted with the caps. So she slept with Moriarty on at least one occasion, and probably numerous times over however long she's been there. According to the Fallout Wiki, Silver was born in the year 2255. They don't cite their source for this, but I'll just assume that that is correct. This means that in the year 2277, when the game is set, she is 22 years old, or 21 depending on the day. So she is quite young. Moriarty, on the other hand, is 50 years old, very easily old enough to be her father. And as I pondered on this, a thought occurred to me. What if he actually is her father? We don't know who Silver's parents are, and Moriarty is easily old enough to be her father, so what if he actually is? Keep in mind, we're talking about a post-apocalyptic world here. Even in the real world, where we have civilization and laws against it, incest still does occur. In the post-apocalypse, you have to figure that this is going to happen a lot more often, because for one thing, there's fewer people and less traveling, so people exist in isolated communities more often than not. So things like incest is going to be a lot more commonplace. It is nevertheless a very taboo subject, which is why, even if Bethesda intended that Colin was her father, they probably wouldn't be open about that. In truth, they probably didn't intend this, so just take this with a grain of salt. This is just speculation, nothing more. But it can explain why she is so traumatized that she abuses drugs in order to forget. Let's not forget that this is the post-apocalypse, and psychiatric medication and counseling is going to be very hard to come by, and probably impossible here on the East Coast, where the followers of the apocalypse who can treat Corporal Betsy for the trauma of being raped by Cook have not yet made their way, even though the Brotherhood of Steel, Herald, and everything else clearly has. So anyone suffering post-traumatic stress disorder or psychological issues on this coast is pretty much screwed as far as professional treatment is concerned. So the only thing a person like Sara can do is self-medicate, and she does this with the chems she abuses. And can you blame her? We don't know what she's been through, and Bethesda's writers weren't competent enough to show us, but anyone can see that this woman is hurting and wants to forget whatever it is that happened to her. You may think my theory that Colin is her father is far-fetched, just like you may think my theory that Mickey is Boppo was far-fetched. I don't really have much to offer to back it up. The ages work out, and they both look kind of similar and have similar physical traits, such as blue eyes. So, who knows? I'm only saying that it's possible. An alternative theory is that Colin Moriarty may have bought her from slavers, just like he did with Gob. This may also be true with Nova as well. Like Gob, they may be slaves owned by Moriarty, or indentured servants, if you prefer a more politically correct term. If this theory is correct, then she probably ended up in Paradise Falls, as many slaves in the capital wasteland do, and then Moriarty bought her to work in his saloon. She may have been one of the inhabitants of Racopolis that was rounded up and enslaved by Penelope Chase, for all we know. Or perhaps she came from the town of Minefield. Your guess is as good as mine. The game gives us nothing to work with. Personally, though, I like the theory that she is Moriarty's daughter. I think that with some effort and better writing, Bethesda could take this idea and rework this quest into something far more interesting and nuanced than what it currently is. Even though, yes, incest is a very taboo topic, but so is slavery, murder, drug abuse, rape, and a million other things. And this quest reminds me of the story of Saint Dymphna. Saint Dymphna is a Catholic saint, and she was a girl that lived in ancient Ireland. This is her story, according to the article on Wikipedia. According to Catholic and Orthodox tradition, Dymphna was born in Ireland in the 7th century. Dymphna's father, Damon, was a petty king of Oriel. Her mother was a devout Christian. When Dymphna was 14 years old, she consecrated herself to Christ and took a vow of chastity. Shortly thereafter, her mother died. Damon had loved his wife deeply, and in the aftermath of her death, his mental health sharply deteriorated. Eventually, the king's counselors pressed him to remarry. Damon agreed, but only on the condition that his bride would be as beautiful as his deceased wife. After searching fruitlessly, Damon began to desire his daughter because of her strong resemblance to her mother. When Dymphna learned of her father's intentions, she swore to uphold her vows and fled his court along with her confessor, Father Garabernus, 2 trusted servants, and the king's fool. Together they sailed towards the continent, eventually landing in what is present-day Belgium, where they took refuge in the town of Giel. One tradition states that once settled in Giel, Dymphna built a hospice for the poor and sick of the region. However, it was through the use of her wealth that her father would eventually ascertain her whereabouts, as some of the coins used enabled her father to trace them to Belgium. Damon sent his agents to pursue his daughter and her companions. When their hiding place was discovered, Damon traveled to Giel to recover his daughter. Damon ordered his soldiers to kill Garabernus and tried to force Dymphna to return with him to Ireland, but she resisted. Furious, Damon drew his sword and struck off his daughter's head. She was said to have been 15 years old when she died. As you might have noticed, there are some parallels between Silver and the story of Dymphna. I do think Emil Pagliarulo comes from a Catholic background. His name is Italian, after all, so he may well have been familiar with the story of Dymphna, and maybe it had some influence on his writing of this quest, even if perhaps only subconsciously, or maybe it's just entirely coincidental. Hard to say for sure. So, what would I have done about this quest differently in order to have made it better? Well, I think the incest angle I suggested has a lot of potential to make the quest a lot deeper and more nuanced. I think that the town of Springvale should be expanded and there should be more abandoned houses so that locating Silver is more involved. The quest marker should not point directly at her. I think the quest should involve following clues based on what you see in the town. You see a house that looks like someone has been living in recently. You go in, but no one is there. Instead, let's say you see there was signs of a struggle, maybe some blood on the floor, and a trail that leads you towards the elementary school. Instead of Silver just being in that house, completely isolated from the raiders, those raiders, in my rewriting of this quest, would have found her, as they logically should have, And now your quest suddenly becomes a lot more interesting. She's somewhere inside that school, and you now have to save her somehow. You can sneak in, you can clear the whole place out, maybe a speech check or two, or maybe in the process of capturing her, Silver had managed to kill one of the raiders, and you can then don that dead raider's attire to infiltrate as a disguise. Wouldn't it be great if the quest were designed to have all these options? And this rewrite I'm proposing could kill two birds with one stone, because it could help answer my question about the cages, because Silver might be locked up inside one of the cages, and it may involve getting a key somewhere further in the dungeon or something. Or maybe you find Silver dead in one of the cages, and on her body you find her journal, and it tells of the horrible things Moriarty has done to her, his daughter. And at this point, you can go back to Megaton and confront him over what he has done. You can show the journal to Sheriff Sims, who then takes him around back for some wasteland justice. Or you can dispense the justice yourself. Or you can show the journal to Moriarty, and it would be like in that movie, Once We're Warriors. Except Moriarty would be like Jake the Muss and Uncle Bully rolled into one, because he was the one that did this terrible crime. And being unable to live with himself after what he's done, Moriarty then steps out of the saloon and then jumps over the rail to his death. And then Gob and Nova take over the saloon, and everyone who is still alive lives happily ever after. Or, let's say you don't find Silver dead. It would be a real tear-jerker if you did, but let's say you find her alive in the dungeon, and you can rescue her. We could rewrite the quest to tie Boppo in with it. Let's say that Boppo was in love with her, and he knew about Moriarty's incestuous behavior towards her. So, just hear me out on this. What if the reason Boppo launched the raid on Megaton was to save Silver? But as we all know, Boppo died in the battle. But let's say that he didn't die in battle, and instead he returns to the school triumphant, and he marries Silver, and she then becomes the queen of the raiders. Boppo is still the king of the raiders, and even though he didn't die, let's say he was still wounded by Sims and bears the scars of it. Both Boppo and Silver would want revenge on Megaton for what Sims and Moriarty had done to them, respectively. And how would they get that revenge? Well, that's where you come in. That's where the giant fucking bomb comes in. It isn't Mr. Burke who wants you to blow up the town for no reason. It's Boppo and Silver who want you to blow it up. And they have an actual reason, because the town of Megaton is a wicked place, debased and corrupt. They allow slavery and incest to exist within the town's walls, and they exclude poor, homeless people like Mickey. You know how in New Vegas you can talk to Caesar and get a long critique on democracy and learn about Hegelian dialectics? Well, imagine if you could have a similar long talk with King Boppo and Queen Silver in their throne room in Springvale Elementary, explaining why Megaton is a wicked place and deserves to be blown up. Then it's up to you to decide whether to actually do it or not. But at least there would actually be an argument presented for it, instead of it just being for the lulz. And you know, if you do it, then you can get that small ranch house as your player housing reward or something. Because it's not like Silver would need it anymore, since she is now the queen of the raiders. So that would get bestowed to you as a quest reward for blowing up Megaton. And in addition, you also get faction reputation with the Raiders, which means they are now no longer hostile to you on sight anymore, or something like that. I don't know. Those are just some brainstorming ideas I've come up with on how the whole quest thing could be massively overhauled and improved. Let me know what you think in the comments, or if you have any ideas of your own on what you'd have done to overhaul this quest. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, subscribe, and share, because the story of Sara Silver is one that I feel should be told, but it seems that I am the only YouTuber that is willing to tell the tale, and my videos don't get anywhere near the traction that they ought to receive in the YouTube algorithm.
The wasteland sucks, kid. Just get used to it.